Okay, so you guys have really outdone yourselves this time. The material you sent over is all about getting our minds in top shape. Looks like you're ready to up your reasoning game, especially with how crazy the world is these days.
Yeah, I can feel like every day throws a new curveball.
It really does. So we're going deep on this piece called La Sinfonía de la Inteligencia, MCP y la Orquestación de Agentes de IA Autónomos. But don't worry, we're focusing on the Google 2.0 Flash Elevando la Mente part. Basically, how to cultivate some seriously advanced reasoning.
Love that title. It's really about more than just problem solving, isn't it?
Exactly. It's
Ugh.
about getting to that next level of understanding and coming up with fresh, innovative solutions.
The kind of thinking we need more of these days, for sure.
Absolutely. And what makes this piece so interesting is that it lays out a whole blueprint for intellectual growth.
Right. It's not some magic trick. It's a skill set we can all develop.
Totally. So let's unpack this blueprint. The piece starts with what it calls the trípode del pensamiento superior, the three core skills for advanced reasoning. And those are, of course, critical thinking, logical thinking, and creativity.
Classic trio.
It is. So let's start with critical thinking. Now, we hear this phrase thrown around all the time, but what does it actually mean in this context?
Well, the source calls it la navaja suiza de la mente, the Swiss Army knife of the mind. I think that's a pretty perfect analogy.
I love that, because a Swiss Army knife is so versatile and so useful in different situations.
Right. It's not just about poking holes in things or being negative. It's about dissecting arguments, really figuring out what's being said, what assumptions are hiding underneath, and then, crucially, evaluating the source itself. Can we trust where this information's coming from?
It's about being an informed and discerning consumer of information.
Exactly. And the piece gives us some great ways to actually practice this, like
Yeah.
really digging into opinion pieces, not just skimming them, but analyzing the arguments, the logic, the potential flaws.
I like that, because we do so much skimming these days.
We do. Another good one is participating in structured debates. That forces you to think on your feet and to consider opposing viewpoints.
And maybe even change your own mind sometimes.
Absolutely. It's all about challenging our own assumptions, too. And, one simple technique for that is playing devil's advocate.
I actually do that a lot, even when I'm by myself,
Yeah.
just to make sure I'm really considering all sides.
It's such a useful exercise. And the source also gives us some more specific tools we can use to hone those critical thinking skills. Formal logic, for example, provides a structured way to analyze arguments.
Sort of like a framework for clear thinking.
Exactly. And then understanding common fallacies, those little traps in reasoning, can help us spot weaknesses in our own arguments and those of others.
So we don't fall for those sneaky tricks.
Right. And of course, there's the scientific method, asking the right questions, formulating hypotheses, testing them rigorously.
You don't have to be a scientist to use that approach.
Not at all. It's about adopting that mindset of evidence-based thinking.
Okay, so that covers critical thinking. Now let's move on to the second leg of the tripod, logical thinking. And the source gives it this beautiful name, el andamiaje el razonamiento, the scaffolding of reasoning.
I love that. It really captures the idea that logic provides a structure.
It does. So what are the key components of logical thinking we should be working on?
Well, there's deduction, of course, drawing specific conclusions from general principles, but it goes beyond that. There's also induction, where you start with specific observations and then formulate a general conclusion.
So going from the particular to the general.
Precisely. Then there's abduction, which is about finding the most likely explanation for something based on the available evidence.
Kind of like a detective solving a case?
Exactly. They see the clues, the specific observations, and they work backward to figure out what probably happened. It's not always foolproof, but it's the best explanation they have given the information. And then we have analogical reasoning, where you draw parallels between different situations to gain new insights.
Like using metaphors to understand complex concepts.
Yes. And the source reminds us that just like with critical thinking, consistent practice is key.
Gotta hit the mental gem.
Right. And there are some fun ways to do that, like tackling complex puzzles, anything that forces you to think strategically and anticipate consequences. Even something like basic programming can really strengthen your logical thinking.
Because it requires that step-by-step sequential thinking.
Exactly. And the source even mentions studying advanced mathematics, which is basically logic in its purest form.
So for those looking to dive into logic, there are plenty of resources out there. Logic puzzles are great. There are tons of apps and websites dedicated to them.
And if you want to get serious, There are online courses specifically on logic and reasoning, and of course, you can always go old school with textbooks.
Plenty of options.
Yeah.
Now on to the third pillar, creativity. Or, as the source so aptly puts it, la chispa de la innovación, the spark of innovation.
It really does feel like that, doesn't it? That burst of insight.
It does. But sometimes creativity feels a little more elusive than, say, logic.
I hear that. But the source actually breaks it down into 3 key characteristics: fluency, flexibility, and originality.
Okay, let's unpack those.
So fluency is all about generating a lot of ideas, just getting them out there, no judgment.
Brainstorming.
Exactly. Flexibility means being able to shift your perspective, seeing things from different angles. And then originality, that's about coming up with something truly new and innovative.
That's the game changer.
It is. And the source gives us some concrete ways to nurture that creative spark. Mind maps are a classic. They help you visually organize your thoughts and see connections. Lateral thinking encourages you to think outside the box, to break free from those well-worn neural pathways. And then there's the simple but powerful what-if exercise, just posing hypothetical scenarios to stretch your imagination.
I do that all the time. What if I could fly? What if I won the lottery?
There you go. It's all about pushing those boundaries. And the source also reminds us that we can find inspiration everywhere: art, music, literature, even just trying new things.
Stepping outside your comfort zone.
Exactly. It's like fuel for the creative fire.
So we've covered the trípode del pensamiento superior: critical thinking, logical thinking, and creativity. But as the source emphasizes, these skills don't just develop on their own. We need consistent practice.
It's all about training that mental muscle.
Right, hitting the el gimnasio de la mente.
I love that, the mental gym.
Yeah.
And the source gives us some great exercises for this mental workout. First up, tackling complex problem solving.
The kind of problems that involve multiple disciplines, right?
Right. Think about climate change. It's not just a scientific issue. It's economic, it's political, it's social.
It's everything.
It is. And there are plenty of these complex problems to grapple with: historical events, ethical dilemmas, business challenges.
And the source points out that tackling these problems in groups can be incredibly beneficial.
Absolutely. Because you get exposed to different perspectives and approaches. You might come up with a solution you never would have thought of on your own.
Collaboration is key.
It is. Another crucial exercise is case and scenario analysis, taking those abstract reasoning skills and applying them to real-world situations.
Kind of like a mental simulation.
Right. You can practice making decisions under pressure, thinking on your feet, adapting to unexpected circumstances.
So things like role-playing exercises, simulations, even analyzing complex data sets.
Exactly. And then the last component of this mental gym is continuous learning, which the source brilliantly called el combustible del intelecto, the fuel of the intellect.
I love that, because learning is what keeps our minds sharp and engaged.
It is, and there are so many ways to do this. Reading widely, attending conferences and talks, joining learning communities, staying up to date in your field.
It's about being a lifelong learner.
Exactly. And it's crucial because the world is constantly changing. We need to keep our minds adaptable.
Now, the third major element in this journey is the importance of diverse perspectives. The source calls this el mosaico del conocimiento, the mosaic of knowledge.
I like that image. It captures the idea that our understanding is richer when it's made up of many different pieces.
It does. So how do we build this mosaic?
Well, the first piece is dialogue with diverse individuals, actively seeking out conversations with people who hold different views and come from different backgrounds.
Which can be challenging,
Yeah.
especially when those views clash with our own.
It can be. But the source emphasizes approaching these conversations with respect and empathy, trying to truly understand where the other person is coming from.
Even if you don't ultimately agree.
Exactly. And these conversations can be so enriching. They can help us identify blind spots in our own thinking, and they force us to articulate our own views more clearly.
The source also mentions the importance of exploring different cultures and ideas.
Ah, yes. El viaje intelectual. It's about going on an intellectual adventure, immersing yourself in the literature, art, philosophy of different cultures, traveling, experiencing different ways of life firsthand.
And even something as simple as watching a documentary or reading a book by an author from a different background.
Absolutely. It all expands our horizons.
And then, of course, there's the consumption of diverse media, which is more important now than ever before.
With the amount of information out there, it's so easy to get trapped in an echo chamber.
Right, where you're only hearing voices that agree with you. So the source stresses the need to expose ourselves to a variety of news and opinion sources.
And to develop that crucial skill of discerning reliable information from unreliable information.
Because not everything you read is true.
Sadly not. And the source reminds us to analyze information from different sources, compare and contrast different accounts to get a fuller picture.
Okay, so we've covered the three main pillars: developing those core cognitive skills, practicing consistently, and embracing diverse perspectives. But the source also provides some additional tools and resources.
Oh yeah, those are great, like brain training apps and logic games.
Super fun way to keep those mental muscles sharp.
And then there are online learning platforms with courses on critical thinking, problem solving, all sorts of good stuff.
And of course, online communities and forums can be great for connecting with other intellectually curious people.
Definitely. And for those who like to go deep, there are tons of books and articles on cognitive psychology, philosophy, neuroscience.
A wealth of information out there. So to wrap things up, this deep dive into La Sinfonía de la Inteligencia has really emphasized that cultivating advanced reasoning is an ongoing journey.
It's not a destination, it's a process.
Exactly. It's about nurturing those core skills. Critical thinking, logical thinking, creativity, and it's about practicing those skills, challenging ourselves, and seeking out diverse perspectives.
And as the source so eloquently puts it, in a world that demands critical thought, innovation, and adaptability, advanced reasoning isn't just a nice to have, it's essential.
I couldn't agree more. And it's not just for our own personal growth. It's for the betterment of society as a whole.
Absolutely.
So for our listeners out there, maybe the next step is to consider which of these pillars resonates most with you right now. Is it honing those cognitive skills? Is it committing to more consistent practice? Is it actively seeking out those diverse perspectives? It's a personal journey, but the first step is recognizing the incredible value of intellectual growth.
And knowing that it's a journey we can all take.